This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC, which is amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Here on 107.5 The Game, Tyler Head along with you. Chris Clark on the other side of the glass. Wes Mitchell taking the rest of the week off. We'll see him back in here on Monday morning. Hopefully everybody out there had a great 4th of July and abbreviated week here, just Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but certainly plenty to talk about. And hopefully, Chris, your 4th of July was good as well.
It was fantastic, Tyler. Spent a lot of time with family, friends, outside. Definitely ate too much. What about you? What was the plate like?
So I was telling Colin about this. My wife's birthday is actually the 4th of July, so that kind of takes on a different dynamic for me.
No kidding.
And she also had to work yesterday, so essentially we just went out to breakfast yesterday morning, and then she had to come back home and get ready for work. So spent a lot of the day by myself getting ready for today's shows because I've been here since 6 a.m. So
yeah,
that consumed most of my day yesterday.
At least someone prepares for the show. I appreciate your efforts.
I try. Watched the hot dog contest yesterday. My man Joey Chestnut, once again, holding on to the mustard yellow belt. And that was kind of the highlight of my viewing.
I ate some, I did eat some hot dogs this weekend, actually, plural. I did not eat 62. And I didn't eat them in a span of, 10 minutes or something?
What was your dog to minute ratio?
Probably like, I don't know, one every like 5 minutes.
So
if you can.
Hold on, I'm doing the math here. Would that be like a fifth of a dog per minute, basically?
Something like that. And I just enjoyed them. You know, I didn't dip the bun in water. I put chili on it, onions, mustard, etc. You know, I had a good time with it.
You don't think you do too well in that contest?
I would do absolutely terrible. And I'm definitely not doing those weird exercises that Joey Chestnut does. Like the biting on biting of the ball and like the weird,
the jumping up and down. Work it down a little bit more.
I'm good with it.
Yeah.
I'm glad it got to go on as planned. The weather almost threw that grading sporting event out the window.
So it initially got canceled.
Yes,
because I'm like I turned on ESPN. They got the little graphic at the bottom of the screen. Currently in a weather delay, and then like Twitter starts lighting up. It's been canceled. Canceled, and you know Joey Chestnut, the American hero himself, said, "Screw that. We're eating some hot dogs today."
There's a revolt almost. Yes, so he got it done. So that's good. That contest actually, I did not watch it actually, and it probably would have diminished my.
Are you like?
To eat a hot
are you
dog.
repulsed by people that do competitive eating? Is it not something you like stomach to watch?
No, I'm fine with it. And I actually used to watch that Man vs. Food show.
That was a good one
with Adam Richman. I think they put some other guy on there, and they kind of changed the format. There was some kind of controversy with it. I can't remember what it was, but anyway. Yeah, I watch that show sometimes, and it was a little different because it was more along the lines of, it wasn't necessarily how many of this or that can you stuff down in 10 minutes. It was more like, all right, we have a 127-ounce steak.
Yes.
You have to eat it in an hour, or here's the world's biggest burrito or something like that. But that was a good one. I don't even think I can eat as much as I used to.
Yeah.
Now the pounds will come on.
Sure.
I can gain more weight very easily, but I cannot eat as much. So it gets kind of out of whack now, unfortunately.
I gotcha. Yeah. Well, Joe Chestnut, 16 out of the last 17 times he's won the contest. And Preston and I were talking about this morning. It's almost getting a little bit maybe boring because he's basically racing himself. Like, all right, he's going to be able to beat his own personal record. Nobody's going to upset him. We don't know what the future of this contest is because there's no young hot shot. Because remember, 15 years ago or 16 years ago now, he upset the Kobayashi guy who was winning every single year. And then, the torch was passed to Chestnut. And I don't know who that next guy is, but Chestnut can't do this forever.
You can't do it forever. There's only so many hot dogs you can eat for so long. He that one year, the one guy upset him.
Yeah, Matt Stoney in 2015.
Stoney. Not to be confused with Matt Stone from South Park fame. Matt Stoney, and then and Kobayashi got banned and got arrested and a bunch of weird things. So nobody. He's pretty much the GOAT, it appears. So it doesn't look like he's going to be unseated anytime soon.
Do you have all 10 of your fingers from the fireworks last night? No accidents?
Yes. Did have some close calls. Not from last night. I did not shoot any off. I had some that were shot in my direction. A little too close for comfort. Out at Lake Murray. So, but I do have them all intact.
No Jason Pierre-Paul here.
No JPP, and my kids last night were not. They like fireworks. They were not a huge fan of them, and frankly, I wasn't. I've gotten a little bit less fun as my kids have gotten a little older and things like that, because that means they kept coming downstairs asking. I'm like, I can't stop the fireworks.
How old are your kids?
7 and 8.
7 and 8. Okay, I feel like when you're a little kid, I feel like the allure of the colors and stuff really does captivate you. But as you get older, if you go to a fireworks show, once you get about 10 to 15 minutes in, it's like, all right, I've
seen this.
Kind of seen what I'm going to see. Let's go on to the next thing.
Yeah, you got to see. Well, and you got to see. You kind of return back to the grand finale or whatever, because that's the coolest part.
Yes.
But actually, cooler than the fireworks over the weekend, they had a flyover.
Okay, I heard something about this. I did not see it, but I heard about it.
They had 4 planes fly over, and that was pretty awesome. So
because it was a thing, I think they fly up and down the coast, but they also made a point to go over Lake Murray too.
Yes, we heard the word was they came from Myrtle Beach.
Okay,
so they must have flown over the coast. So that was probably the coolest thing I saw. That was about it. And they're actually, Tyler, there were. I don't know if we could say there were some Gamecocks things actually that happened.
Yes.
And then there were some things that were just more discussion points, right? Sure. I know probably you and Colin got into it last hour. South Carolina picked up a big high school commitment.
Yes.
Right, in baseball. That actually happened. And then there were some other things that just became more of a conversation piece over the long weekend, over the holiday. For instance, you had the Dylan Stewart situation, right? You had big 5-star Dylan Stewart, guy that South Carolina's been in on a long time. The On3 RPM, the recruiting prediction machine, flipped to Ohio State, and that became a big conversation piece. People sitting around enjoying their hot dogs and ribs and things like that, and checking out GamecockCentral.com. They said, "Oh, what is this?" And so that was actually a pretty interesting conversation piece over the holiday. Not that Dylan Stewart has done anything in terms of a commitment. Not that there's even been any real news.
Right.
He wasn't on a visit this past weekend. It's just something that happened.
And this is kind of one of those things that, and obviously you're a recruiting expert, you kind of got to really read in between the lines of what people are saying and, coming off official visits and stuff like that to get a sense of what might be changing with Dylan Stewart's commitment. Obviously, his most recent official visit was to South Carolina a couple weeks ago, but the latest On3 RPM does have Ohio State with a slight advantage right now.
It does. And so for the RPM, or the recruiting prediction machine, let me give a quick refresher on what it is and how it works. So a lot of people talked about the crystal balls, for instance, that 24/7 has. That's more of just hey, someone can enter a crystal ball. An industry expert, someone who works for a team site, they can enter one, and you can just go through and look at them. Okay, this person has a crystal ball for South Carolina, or this person has a crystal ball for Ohio State or Florida State. The RPM has the human element as well. It has expert predictions attached to it, but it also has more than that. It's a formula. It's an algorithm. And so the actual formula is proprietary, and I don't know it, but I do know what it includes. And so expert predictions are weighed pretty heavily into the formula overall. But it also includes other things like historical data. So, for instance, if there was a particular high school and that high school had just happened for whatever reason to produce 10 Power 5 guys over the past 5 years, and 8 of them went to South Carolina, that's going to be weighed in some form or fashion because there's clearly some kind of link. Geography can weigh in. So a kid from the state of South Carolina who has a South Carolina offer is going to be more apt, will be weighed a little more heavily to maybe go to South Carolina than UCLA. And then social sentiment, expert predictions, even outside of the On3 network, all those things can factor in. And so when you look at Dylan Stewart's recruitment, it's actually gone up to where Ohio State has a 51% chance on the recruiting prediction machine. South Carolina's right behind with 31%. And I actually published a piece on July 3rd, a couple days ago, about why the RPM has flipped for Dylan Stewart. And there are some newer predictions for Ohio State, but really it hasn't really changed since like June. There's some out-of-network predictions by some folks from Ohio State. There was one that was entered in the spring for Ohio State, and then just some of the social sentiment around it, people talking about it. Dylan Stewart, there's been a little buzz for Ohio State, but I think, Tyler, kind of what do you make of all this? And I don't think it's as much of a big change. Like Dylan Stewart is not coming off of a visit to Ohio State. He took it earlier in June. Yep. I don't think anything has truly changed. I think this is a little bit more of like just the sentiment and what some people are hearing. Right,
and we'll continue talking about Dylan Stewart coming up next as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls along here on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
I have some good and bad news for you, Tyler, on Firehouse Subs. I got an email this morning telling me, an avid Firehouse Subs consumer, that soon the smoking triple stack is going away. That's the bad news. But there's a couple good pieces of news for that. Number one, you can still go get it. So if you have not had the smoking triple stack, one of their media subs ever, make sure you go get it before it is gone, because this may be, we're getting down to the last chance. So that it kind of makes you sad, but also happy, because if you haven't had it, you can still go get it. If you have had it and you're like, man, that thing was good, because it is, you can go get it again before it's gone. The other piece of good news, Tyler, they always have a specialty sub that they put out, something new they test in the lab. They'll put out a new one that is also outstanding. So if you haven't had the smoking triple stack, go check it out. Any of the 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations, FirehouseSubs.com, you can find the closest one next to you and order it via the Rapid Rescue. It'll be sitting there waiting on you when you get there. Or you can download the Firehouse Subs app. Do the same thing. Find the closest one near you. You can order it right from the app, and you can earn rewards points towards free Firehouse Subs. And Tyler, if you don't want the smoking triple stack for whatever reason, maybe you just had it, I don't know, yesterday, the day before, you can check out the sub of the day, which today is the New York Steamer. $7.99 for a medium, $5.99 for a small. All 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations. Go check it out, FirehouseSubs.com or the Firehouse Subs app.
More on Dylan Stewart coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour.
Stacking Benjamins with Joe and his good friend OG not only has great financial insight, it's laid back with humor too.
Mr. Len Penzo's here. Now when I buy something, I'm like, can actually spend any time with this thing. Len, I would imagine you've got to think about that too when you're buying stuff.
You know, before I was retired, if I wanted something, I bought it. I don't care what it was. The Kings were in the Stanley Cup Finals, and me and the Honeybee, I mean, we didn't even think about it. $3,600 on 2 tickets. Now that I'm retired, those days are gone.
The Stacking Benjamin Show, available on YouTube or wherever you listen.
107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head. On your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs, Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you on this Wednesday, day after 4th of July. And as Chris was mentioning over the weekend, nothing groundbreaking as far as Gamecocks go over the weekend, but kind of reading in between the lines on a few things, particularly when it comes to Dylan Stewart and where he's going to eventually end up committing sooner rather than later, hopefully. And Chris, I was reading your article about this on GamecockCentral.com, and you liken this a lot to, coincidentally enough, another 5-star from this past cycle in Nick Harbor and the roller coaster that his commitment and recruiting process was, that we obviously know came down to the very last minute, where it looked like for sure he was going to be going to Oregon that morning, but then ends up putting on the South Carolina hat that afternoon.
Yeah, a little bit of a broken record alert, but I'm going to keep saying this because I literally put it in that piece you're referencing. I'm going to say it again here now. There's not a school that just signs 5-stars without a battle. Like if you really follow recruiting, yes, even Georgia, even Ohio State, even Bama, all the programs that typically reside in the top 5 nationally in the recruiting rankings, year after year. Schools that have finished number 1 in the recruiting rankings. When they're after these big-time targets that everybody in the country wants, they're not getting them uncontested. I mean, it's very rare. So, and you may even get an early commitment from a guy, but if you do, schools are going to keep coming after him, and they may end up going taking other visits, and you're still going to have tightly contested battles, right, even on guys that you land early. So Dylan Stewart is going to make, most likely, an earlier decision in a relative sense. Because if he does make a decision later this month or sometime in August before his senior season, that'll be an early decision, because it's not going to go down to December. It's not going to go down like Nick Harbor did to February, right? So that's a key difference there. But when you look at Harbor, South Carolina was really always there. Shane Beamer started recruiting Harbor actually for Oklahoma when Harbor was like a freshman, like wasn't really even on the radar to the extent that he eventually was. As soon as Shane Beamer got the South Carolina job, December 2020, Harbor was one of the first guys that it was known like this is a guy he's going to go try to get. And that really ended up paying off. So South Carolina was always a big factor. Other schools were kind of a revolving door, or they kind of rotated in and out of being not necessarily the leader, but maybe a perceived favorite, or maybe just being a school that had some buzz. I mean, LSU was one early for Harbor. They were nowhere to be found at the end, but they had some early buzz. Miami had some at one point. Oregon was the one that got closest, because literally at 3 a.m. on signing day, that's where he was going. And then it flipped throughout the morning. So the parallel to Stewart is South Carolina's been there for Stewart. They've been even the public leader at times. They've been behind the scenes. They've been the leader a lot. But these other programs, it was known that Georgia and Ohio State and Miami and maybe Tennessee, some of these other schools were going to make their run and make it tough. And they have. And Ohio State is chief among those now. I think the question just is, can South Carolina hold off Ohio State and any other suitors? And I think they'll have a good shot. It remains to be seen if they ultimately will. I do think, Tyler, most likely, I can't say this for sure right now, I think most likely they'll even get one more crack, South Carolina will, at getting Stewart back on campus again before he decides.
Right. And he has not given an official time for when he's going to decide. The anticipation is that it will be before his senior season starts here, I guess, in about a month and a half or so.
Yeah, it's been back and forth. It was, for most of the process, it was planned that he would make a decision in this summer. And then in the last several weeks, there was a little bit of back and forth of maybe extending that process out to December and signing early in that period. It seems to have come back now to the thought is that he's more likely than not going to make a decision this summer. We don't know for sure.
Right.
There's still, some time to go here, some weeks in the month of July to sort that out. But if you had to say, that's what it seems like.
Yeah, and obviously you don't look for moral victories or anything like that, but should Dylan Stewart not decide to come to South Carolina, whether they be good to go to Ohio State, Miami, Alabama, whatever it may be, the fact that South Carolina was in the running down to the very end is significant. And obviously they signed Nicholas Harbor in this past recruiting cycle to be in on another 5-star guy like Dylan Stewart down to the very end. While, again, you may not get him, that is still something that other recruits down the road can keep their eye on, like, why was he interested in South Carolina? What do they have going on down there that I might look into? And again, it's a moral victory at the end of the day, but something that could have a ripple effect in years to come.
Yeah, I think that can help. But I'll also say this. This being your, Shane Beamer had the 21 cycle that really was not a recruiting cycle. I mean, that was just a mad scramble. It's during COVID. You're putting your class together in the matter of weeks, even days, when you factor in the December signing period when he got hired versus when you're signing guys during the early period, the transfer market. So really you've had the 22 and the 23 class, and now you're working on the 24 class. And it has leveled up in terms of quality every year. So I would actually argue that, look, if they don't get Dylan Stewart, it's not like fold the program. You understand if a guy like that goes to an Ohio State or a Georgia or somewhere like that. And if it's not South Carolina, it's more likely Ohio State, I think, at this point. But this is, I think, the time period. The timing is right now for South Carolina to start landing some more guys like this. And I don't, by this, I don't necessarily mean it has to be a 5-star. I don't necessarily mean it has to be a top 10 guy or the number 1 prospect in the country, according to On3. But this is the time to take advantage and level up and sign some guys like this because, yes, it's nice to start making more top 5s for big-time prospects. It's nice to start making more final 2s and 3s. But at some point, you got to convert that into landing the guys.
Sure.
Because, like you said, the moral victory thing, that can help you a little bit, like on-field progress. Narrowly losing to an elite team, like that can help. But what helps more is beating the elite team. And what helps more in terms of program building is landing the elite prospect. So instead of finishing second and almost getting Nick Harbor and losing him to Oregon, you actually got him.
Yep.
And I think that's what you need. That's what they've done with some guys in this class. You look at the O-line class, some of the other acquisitions in the past couple classes. But I think that Stewart is the type of guy where you're really announcing your presence and you're really showing what type of recruiting you can do at South Carolina. Not only that, but then you're actually adding an impact player to your roster. And when you look at the programs that are in the college football playoff, that are playing for championships, basically if you're looking for the programs that are where you want to be, if you're South Carolina, ultimately, if you're shooting high, they're landing guys like Dylan Stewart and Nick Harbor. And so it's time, I think, to go out and land some of them. You've started doing that. You've done some of it in this class even against big competition. I think you got to go out and continue doing it.
Absolutely, and we'll continue to keep our eyes on that. Again, Dylan Stewart has not announced a commitment date as of yet, but the anticipation is that it will be sometime before his senior year of football does start, which, of course, will be in August here, just next month now. So we'll certainly see what happens there. Coming up next, there is another prospect that South Carolina has eyes on that has announced a commitment date. We'll talk about that coming up next. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
Hey, I know you probably have not taken a great look at your insurance anytime recently. You may not know. You probably know who has you covered, right? But do you know what the coverage looks like? Do you know how much you're paying? Do you know how your coverage and the price you're paying stacks up to what you could be paying and what kind of coverage you could be getting? Well, if you don't know and if you'd like to find out more, let me make a recommendation. Check out our friend Amy Mason Cup with Amy Mason Cup State Farms. She and her team make it super easy to switch and save. They have all sorts of tools to help you do that, Whether it's something like the Drive Safe and Save app for State Farm with interactive maps, driving tips, helps you save up to 30% on your car insurance premiums. Whether it's something like that or just being able to bundle or just being able to say, hey, why don't you try this type of coverage? Why don't you look at this particular price? They can do that for you. Amy Mason Cup, 803-772-5554. When my family was looking to switch and save on our insurance, we called her and she took care of the rest. They can help you with all sorts of policies and give you personalized quotes to meet your needs, help you save home, auto, business, boat, renters, life, and so much more. Her office is just off I-26 at St. Andrews Road, Ashland Park Plaza. That's 612 St. Andrews Road. Visit her website, amymasoncup.com. That's Amy, MASINCUPP.com, or 803-772-5554. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
More recruiting talk next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. 107.5 The Game.
Your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Wes Mitchell will be back at the beginning of next week. I've been talking recruiting all show long, focused a lot on Dylan Stewart in those first couple of segments. Don't know when his commit date is just yet, but we did recently learn one prospect who is going to be committing on August the 5th, that being Jalawez Solomon, the 4-star athlete prospect out of Ellaville, Georgia, class of 2024. And this is somebody that the Gamecocks have had their eye on for a while. Did visit early on in June. I believe that first weekend he was in that group of official visitors. And now we're just a couple of weeks away from learning where he's going to play college ball at.
Tell us, Tyler, about Ellaville, Georgia.
I can't tell you much about it.
You don't know much about it?
I can honestly tell you I don't know anything about it.
Okay. Well, I was relying on you. I don't know much about it either. I have not visited Schley County High, although they have put out some pretty good players over the last few years. They've had several. Solomon is one of the latest and listed as an athlete by On3, but is a guy that is being recruited by South Carolina, by Torian Gray, as a defensive back prospect. Probably be a corner for them, and I think that's really the case for most schools. He has his list of finalists that he situated back last month: Auburn, Florida State, Kentucky, South Carolina, and A&M. And right now, Tyler, I think FSU should probably be considered the front runner. That's probably not a stretch. Solomon actually named FSU as his leader after the visit. They got his last official visit the weekend of June 23rd. South Carolina got the first one, as you said, right at the beginning of June, and then A&M. And those are the only three, I believe, that he's taken as far as official visits. He's been on campus a lot of other times, other various capacities to different places. But those are his three officials. And so my question on this one was that South Carolina's last crack? You know, was it going to be, hey, he visits Florida State that last weekend, they're named the leader, and then that's kind of it? If that's the case, the picture doesn't look as good for you.
Right.
The good news is it does look like you're going to get another crack here. It looks like Solomon's going to visit one more time, which will be really about a week before that decision, right at the end of the month. And if he follows through with that, it could become very interesting, I think. It'll be right at the end of the month. He'll check out South Carolina again. I think this one is probably either FSU or South Carolina, with the Noles holding on to a lead right now. Probably not a giant lead, but I think a fairly comfortable for them.
Sure.
But South Carolina's still in it. And so that's the question. Will they be able to, definitely get him to that planned campus visit again? And can they kind of turn him back? I think that's the key.
And so I looked up where Ellaville is. Honestly, I had no clue. It is situated between Perry and Columbus, pretty far down in South Georgia. So, and I was reading some of the quotes that Solomon gave to On3, and he did mention that proximity to home was pretty important to him. And when you look at all the schools on his list, obviously Florida State and Tallahassee, definitely the closest one, which could be a contributing factor to why they have the nod right now.
Yeah, I knew it was somewhere in that area to where it's closer to Tallahassee. But I think one of his quotes, Tyler, was close to home but not too close.
Yeah.
And so one of the questions is, all right, well, Ellaville to Columbia is, I don't know much about Ellaville, but I do know, I can look at a map. I can Google it. 4.5 hours.
Yes.
Not too bad.
Right.
Not too bad. And so,
as far as major programs go, the closest one to Ellaville would be Auburn, because they're just over the state line of Columbus. So, and that's not on his finalist list there. So, yeah, the next closest, just spitballing here, would be Tallahassee.
Yeah. So, I think, again, South Carolina has some things that he really likes. I mean, it's been interesting because after the South Carolina visit, Solomon pretty much said South Carolina had the edge in so many words, kind of paraphrasing. Then after the FSU visit, it was FSU. So is this more of a case of, last visit gets the best impression? That can certainly happen. Has FSU done enough on the whole, and is that little bit better proximity going to help them in the end? We'll see. But I do think it's good for South Carolina to potentially get this last crack. Torian Gray, Solomon has a really good relationship with Torian Gray, really likes him. I think he really likes the environment both at South Carolina and at Florida State. And so we'll just have to see. It's one of those that's kind of too early to call. Particularly, I was honestly, Tyler, getting kind of closer to, okay, we can call this one in favor of Florida State if you're making kind of the political projection about where it's going to go. But with the news that he's probably going to go back to South Carolina, again, if that holds, I think this thing could be really interesting. And when you look, Tyler, at the class that South Carolina is putting together for the 2024 class at defensive back, they've got a couple good ones, a couple 4-star guys. Kelvin Hunter, in-state guy who's a safety, and then Braden Lee out of Maryland, the DMV area, who's more of a corner. They're going to need some more guys. I think when you look at the roster overall at corner, there's some young players who have a chance. I mean, certainly Vakari Swain is a guy that the staff is extremely high on, a guy I'm really high on based on what he did out of high school. You've got some guys that are older on the roster, Marcellus Style, O.D. Fortune. So when you start looking at replenishing the cornerback ranks, there's certainly, when you look at Lee at corner and then whoever else they add to the class, I think there's going to be an opportunity potentially for some pretty early playing time at corner. And that's a spot historically where if you're good enough, you can get on the field pretty early.
Right. And for a guy like Solomon, and, we're just kind of taking a dive into where Ellaville is here, it's a very small town, population under 2,000, the county itself, population of about 4,500. This is one of those kind of guys that obviously I'm assuming that they're a single A school, if not single A, 2A. These are the kind of guys that usually pop up through camps. Correct, guys that, their Friday night tape maybe isn't getting a lot of attention because of the quality of competition that they play, but when they get into these individual camps and can show their unique skill set, that's where they tend to gain a lot of attention from these bigger schools.
Yeah, and sometimes maybe if you have a guy that popped up from that same school, even if it's not, like that's not a school that's going to have the foot traffic of like somewhere in Atlanta,
sure,
Buford High or something like that. But if there's another guy that's been on the radar at that school, maybe when he camps, he brings a couple of the younger guys with him. Maybe when he takes an unofficial visit for a game, he brings a couple of the younger guys with him. Certainly when college coaches are going by the school, they could see him. So that does help. If you're at a smaller program, if you have a bigger prospect, you find that sometimes. There was a pretty big time recruit who went to Auburn. It's Zykevius Walker. That was it. No longer on the Auburn roster, but he was honestly a freaky athlete, a big edge guy. I remember seeing him in camp, and he was from the same high school, Schley County, out of the 2020 class, I believe. And so that's an example of, I mentioned sometimes a high school will have a guy, and that helps you find kind of the next guys. But Schley County, they've had several. They've had several over the last couple years.
And that general area, Ellaville, not too far from Montezuma, which is where Roquan Smith is from, another big recruit out of that area. So, yeah, these small areas, while it may not be the stiffest competition necessarily, you can still get really good talent from these smaller towns.
I have a good Roquan Smith story.
Okay.
He was good.
Yes,
that was a wild recruitment. Remember, he was going to go to UCLA.
He was
randomly.
He was going to go to UCLA, and that seemed like almost kind of a done deal until the last second, then flipped over to Georgia.
He was. I just remember seeing him at camp, and not a huge guy.
Yeah,
but he was just so good. So we were at a camp. It was Rivals had when we were on the Rivals network, they had these camps called the 5-Star Challenge, and so they would invite like the top prospects in the country, and they would all go work out, and they were awesome because you got to see some big timers. I mean, I've seen so many guys who are still playing in the NFL because I was able to go to camps like that where it's some of the best of the best. And one time I was at the hotel we were all staying at, players, media, etc. And I was working out, and Roquan Smith came through, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, you're getting it in." And then he was asking me what kind of music I was listening to, and I told him, and he told me he liked country music. So we were kind of talking back and forth there.
When you're from South Georgia,
I think you got to.
It's what you grow up around, right?
And Gamecock tight end Trey Knox, another big from Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Very big country music fan, as we learned. What was he bumping when he rolled up?
Chris Stapleton.
Chris Stapleton.
Yeah.
Him and my mom would be really good friends.
I did not get Roquan's exact playlist or like his favorites, but yeah, it kind of took me aback because like I knew it was him, and now doing big, had a great career obviously, and now doing big things in the NFL. So that's really fun story there to look back on.
Probably the best sideline to sideline linebacker I can ever remember watching. Just all over the field.
An animal.
Absolute. All right, we'll head into a break, come back, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. I got a question in on the Firehouse Subs text line a little bit earlier that I want to propose to Chris on the other side. That's coming up next here on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
Hey, did you know that utilizing your smartphone, you can control so many of the things in your home? Lighting, thermostat, sound system, your TV, your security cameras, your alarms. Bring your house into the modern age and find out how to do that by contacting our friends Michael and Nathan at Integrated Media. You can impress your guests with preset lighting themes that you can change at the touch of a button if it's too hot or too cold, or even if, hey, I'm leaving the house for a little bit, I can turn my thermostat up, save a little bit on my power bill. When I know I'm heading back, go ahead and turn that thermostat down so it feels good when I get back into the house. Or even turn up the volume to your favorite song without having to make your way over to the stereo. You can do that and so much more with a complete smart home system. But to install your smart home system, you need somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody who's done it before, somebody who has a proven track record. That is exactly what the team at Integrated Media can do for you. They specialize in installing smart home systems right here in the Midlands. If you don't even need a smart home system, but you want just something as simple as mounting a TV, if you need a new security system, if you want to pull out your old video game systems and not have a zillion cords, they can put it into an integrated system for you, just like they did for me. They actually did that at my house. Hit them up, integratedmediainc.com. That's integratedmediainc.com. Give them a call, 803-948-8327. That's Integrated Media. Make sure you check out some inspiration photos on Facebook or Instagram, Integrated Media Columbia. Again, that's Integrated Media, 803-948-8327.
All right, wrap up the day coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head. On your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
Even better than I was the last time, baby. Ooh, 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 ooh.
We back.
I'm good.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris along with you for a few more minutes for the halftime show coming up with Jay and Terry at the top of the hour. I mentioned I got a text in a little bit earlier on the Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. A nameless texter wanted to pose this question, and Chris, I think you're the perfect person to answer this. Do you think the other schools that are recruiting a kid is more indicative of talent than star ratings? Seems like seeing some quality 3-star players getting recruited by top schools.
That is a great question / observation. In a lot of cases, yes. There's actually a lot to unpack with that question. even offer lists can be a little deceiving. I think some people like to kind of bash star ratings a little bit and say they don't matter. They're not a useful metric. The data shows that they are a useful metric in the sense that if you're signing, several 5 stars in a class, for instance, the programs that are stacking up classes like that, when you're putting together top 5 recruiting classes on a consistent basis, you are going to be good. It's really hard not to be. Historically, there's some, like I remember Florida State had some classes earlier in the .com era that kind of, fell apart. That can happen. But now we have more and more data, like more data than ever, whether it's camps or measurements, track times, just so much more data than we had back in 2003, for instance, 20 more years. And so I don't want to say it's gotten more scientific, but really it probably has. We've gotten, I think, a little bit better at projecting guys. Even offer lists can be liars because you can look at a guy and say, okay, we beat Bama and Auburn and Georgia, et cetera, on this guy. Well, were those schools really pushing for him? That's another thing. You see, Alabama sometimes will offer guys, but it's like a camp offer. It's like we're offering him, but we need to get him in camp and see, right? And maybe they'll end up filling up at that position. Even those can be liars. But I would agree with the premise in that if you were signing, the more guys you're signing in a class that big time blue blood type programs, really good programs, recruiting at a high level, the more guys you sign that are truly wanted by those schools, I think that's probably better than the star ranking system overall, if you're going to look at it. But I still think star rankings are useful because if you go back and look at, say, the first round of the NFL draft, there's a pretty good percentage of those players that were former 5 stars.
Sure.
That data can also end up matching up, right? Because if you've got, I know how On3 does their rankings right now with Charles Power. He's not going up and down the list and saying, okay, this guy has 25 Power 5 offers. I'm going to rank him a 4-star as a placeholder. He's much more analytical than that. He's not afraid to rank a kid who's going to go to a lower level school as a 4-star. Yeah. He's not afraid to rank a guy in the top 150 if everybody else, the other 3 major services, have him as a 3-star. He's not afraid to do that. But a lot of times that the data points end up adding up. If a guy is a no-brainer type 5-star, a lot of times he's a no-brainer type take scholarship offer to those other programs.
Yeah, and it's interesting this texter brings up 3 stars in particular because I feel like we've almost become inclined to kind of overlook 3-star prospects because everybody wants 5 stars. You can't get a 5-star, 4 stars really good, and you get a 3 stars, people go, it's just a 3-star. But and you mentioned plenty of guys go in the first round of the NFL draft are 5-star talents. But I think I remember hearing a couple of years ago, like the average star rating for an NFL player is like 2.5. So you bring these guys in with the anticipation of developing them, and they may have a raw ability or raw talent in a certain area that you look to improve. So there's a reason why the big schools still go after 3 stars and 2-star guys because they see something in them that they know they can bring out and get them up to, by the time their college career is over, that 5-star level.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a difference when you look at that. You look at the NFL, there's more draft picks, there's 32 teams drawing from a draft. It's more individualized. When you're building a team, if you signed every single year a team that had an average star rating of 2.5 or 3, the odds are not in your favor to be very good unless you are, those guys have all gotten out. They've all developed. They've had their own paths. Like there's just so much more data. You can't approximate that in high school. So if you're building a great college team, you typically want to get the most no-brainer talent as possible. Even the greatest teams are going to have those 3-star types sprinkled in.
Sure.
You're building at the NFL level. You don't care as much. That doesn't matter. Yeah. You're just looking at the college picture. So a little bit different. But I think, that people do overlook that. Even with transfers, we've seen some belly aching in the past about certain transfers because of the school they've come from. If you build an entire roster of transfers from a lower level, you're probably not going to be good. You sprinkle some in, Nate Atkins, for instance, they can add to your roster for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the engagement on the Firehouse Subs text line. Tomorrow we'll jump back little bit more into previewing opponents for the upcoming 2023 season. It's been the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with Jay and Terry coming up next on 107.5 The Game.